So we're going to start. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for coming on this winter day in New York, except it's not. Uh, I'm Harold Holzer. I have the honor of serving as director of Roosevelt House, and we are looking forward to some help in making sense of the 2022 midterms, which I'm sure we will get today. And we're honored to have former Congressman Steve Israel here, who is, as many of you know, a bookstore entrepreneur now. The bookstore's name is Theodore's Books, and it's in Oyster Bay, so you know who it's named after. It's named after Eleanor's uncle, right? So he is most welcome in Eleanor's house. And Susan Del Percio, I think, is making her first visit to the stage of Roosevelt House, and Basil will do the formal introductions. And of course, Basil Smikle, who is the director of the Roosevelt House Public Policy Program. We are honored to have two very special guests, Professor Joyce Miller and her husband. Joyce Miller is a professor in the Public Policy Program, and her husband, of course, is Congressman Jerry Nadler, who is the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, and come January, looking on the bright side, he will be the representative of Hunter College in Congress as his community expands formally to the east side, although, as many of you know, he ran a rather triumphant race on both sides of the park recently. So welcome, Jerry. And Basil, I turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let's do that one more time. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay. Yeah. You know, I used to do rallies and stuff all the time, so I got to make sure everybody's with it. Thank you so much, Harold, for your leadership in welcoming us today. Professor Miller, Congressman Nadler, thank you so much for your leadership and for what you do for the students here. To all of our students and faculty and guests, it's wonderful to see all of you here. Just a few days before we give thanks as a nation, and so thanks for spending some time with us. For our committed staff, Bianca, who you may have met upstairs, Peter, Danny, who's manning the controls over there, and Phil and Aaron, who helped put all of this together. Thank all of you as well. So let's get right into it. These are two really good friends of mine, and I'm so excited that I can share a stage with them and not be asked questions like we're used to do, but I can get to ask them questions now. Former Congressmember Steve Israel served in the U.S. Congress between 2001 and 2017, including 4 years as chairman of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. That's been in the news a lot lately. Not your campaign committee, but the campaign committee, 2011 to 2015. He left Washington, and I love that you always put this in here, unindicted and undefeated. To pursue new passions. That is a tentpole these days, isn't it? In 2021, he opened a small independent bookshop, Theodore's Books, in his historic hometown of Oyster Bay, fulfilling a lifelong dream. He also directs the Nonpartisan Institute of Politics and Global Affairs at the Brooks School of Public Policy at Cornell University, my alma mater, which serves as a platform for civic engagement and bipartisan dialogue. He's published two critically acclaimed satires of Washington, The Global War on Morris, 2014, and Big Guns in 2018. Steve's commentary has been featured on CNN, MSNBC. Oftentimes we've had the pleasure to share a desk together on MSNBC. He's been featured in the New York Times, Atlantic Magazine, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal. I've seen you in thehill.com as well. And profiled on HBO's Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, and has appeared on CBS's 60 Minutes. He lives with his wife, Kara, in Oyster Bay, Long Island. He has 2 daughters and 2 grandchildren, and he is here with us today. Thank you, Congressmember. Susan Del Percio, who I have to say we have known each other for about 15 to 20 years now, I'm sorry, I don't mean to date any one of us up here, and have probably been on TV, partnered together for pretty much that length of time. She's a well-known political strategist and crisis communications consultant, also a political analyst for MSNBC and NBC News Think contributor. She's got nearly 30 years of experience in the political, government, nonprofit, and private sector arenas, is a trusted advisor who helps leaders develop and execute focused strategic communications and winning crisis management campaigns. She served as special advisor to the governor from 2014 to 2015, and prior to founding her previous firm in 2001, Susan served as a deputy commissioner for the city of New York. She received a bachelor's and master's degrees from Emerson College, who's done some great polling recently, and Lincoln Project as well. Yes. So we'll get to that in a second. No, actually, why don't you do that right now? Tell us about the work on the Lincoln Project.
Well, the Lincoln Project, the Lincoln Project was quite the experience. Many of you know it for the ads you all saw on TV and on the news. I was in charge of heading up the Republicans and Independents for Biden, which was to get former elected officials and other names to help persuade common sense Republicans who needed that final push to say no to Trump. They've been Republicans all their lives. It was time to state, but they really weren't comfortable, and they needed kind of the okay, the permission slip in a lot of ways. So we also did a lot of recruitment on the grassroots level. I think I must have personally placed about 200 op-eds around the country for different people. It was a real, I mean, in many ways, it was kind of the setting the ground and the table for what folks like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger did in this past election, and going after that 5 to 10% of Republicans that were, you know, or I call them center-right independents, to vote sanely and against the crazy.
Okay. I can't tell you how thrilled I am to have both of you here. I wanted this conversation to be less panel, more green room. The green room conversations, I'm telling you, that's where you need to be. It should have its own YouTube channel, because we have these great I mean, we may be partisan in some way, shape, or form, depending on who's in that room at the time, but we have these great unfiltered conversations, and I have to think that that's where we can get if more policy could come from those green room conversations, we get a lot done in this country. But the reason that Steve and Susan are here and they're so good is because it's just very thoughtful conversation. I'm so glad for you to be here. But Steve, I really wanted to ask my first question of you, because you served with Nancy Pelosi. We all, I guess most, if not all of us, heard her announcement this week or last week. Just give us some of your thoughts about her tenure, the future, Hakeem Jeffries, who is a likely successor as a minority leader and potentially speaker down the road. And what are the unique challenges for him in this new Congress?
Well, Basil, thank you so much for the invitation, and wonderful to be reunited with Susan. We were on air was it Thursday or Friday? I can't remember. We were invited to do the color commentary during Speaker Pelosi's announcement. And I don't know about you, Susan, but I had no idea what she was going to announce. And now we're on camera to analyze that.
And what's funny is we were just talking in upstairs, the green room upstairs, about how no one knew what she was going to say.
It's
no one. One of the best kept secrets. I mean, Congressman,
yep.
You probably know it's hard to keep a secret like that in Washington, but she did.
And what a treat to be with my former colleague and wonderful friend, Jerry Nadler. Give him a big hand. He is just extraordinary. All Jerry Nadler did is single-handedly save democracy as the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. I do not know how you top that, Congressman. And Harold Holzer. Now, Harold is one of my favorite historians. He mentioned that I have this new independent bookstore in Oyster Bay called Theodore's. And so for those of you who want to read Harold's exceptional book, you can get it at theodoresbooks.com. I'm told I have to keep saying this by my general manager. So Nancy Pelosi, I made this point on MSNBC, I have one fundamental disagreement with most of the conventional punditry about Nancy Pelosi's value to our country. And that is that the pundits are wrong when they say she's the most consequential woman in recent American politics. She's the most consequential human being in recent American political history. And I know that Jerry has had as much, in fact, more interaction with her than I have. But I was her chief political lieutenant for 4 years as the chair of the DCCC. And so I spent 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 meetings a day, depending on what was happening with her room. Let me just give you kind of a behind-the-scenes context of what that was like. And Jerry, of course, has his own experiences here. When you would walk into Nancy Pelosi's office on any issue, 2 things were notably displayed in her office. One was a dish of Ghirardelli chocolates, right front and center on the coffee table. The other was a bunch of baseball bats from her beloved San Francisco Giants that were stacked up. Remember those baseball bats right against? As if to say, we can do this the sweet way or we can do this the hard way, but we will do this. Right, Jerry? We will do this. She always had, just to answer your question about this transition, she started thinking about leaving in 2012. She would sit with Chris Van Hollen and me in these leadership meetings after most of the leadership left, and she would say, I have 9 grandchildren. I do not need to be here. Which of you is ready to fill in? And she was always so clear about her metrics of what it would take for her to leave. Number one, and again, Jerry knows this better than anybody. Number one, who can lead this disparate and diverse caucus? You have to be like Toscanini conducting a jazz fusion orchestra in the Democratic caucus. So who can bring the Blue Dogs and the progressives and the CBC and all of the elements of the caucus together? Number two, who can negotiate? Not with the House Republicans, because quite honestly, they were pretty easy to negotiate with. But you also have to be able to negotiate with Chuck Schumer. You got to be able to negotiate with Harry Reid back in the time. You have to know how to negotiate with President Obama or President Bush. You're not just negotiating with your counterparts on the floor of the House on the Republican side. You're negotiating with the entire government. Who has the skills to negotiate? Third, who can raise the money? Who's going to be able to raise the money that Nancy Pelosi raised? When I was the chairman of DCCC, we raised $250,000 per cycle. I didn't do that. She did that. So who could raise the money? She started having these conversations in 2012. She continued them in 2014. 2016, Donald Trump got elected. I left. And she said, I have to stay. I cannot leave this country in the hands of that man. 2018, she becomes speaker. 2020, Joe Biden is elected president. This is the first time since 2012 that she feels that she has fulfilled the indices, the metrics, and she feels very comfortable handing it off to a new generation. That gives you a sense of how she operates and how she calculates.
And new generation is right, because Hakeem is 52. African American would be the first to hold that position. And it is important for where we are, particularly post-midterms, because of the role that youth played in the Democratic coalition in these midterms. What are some of the unique challenges he's got in this new Congress?
Well, all of the challenges that Nancy Pelosi predicted. So can he keep the caucus together? So far, they have done Hakeem and the Speaker, the leadership teams. It would appear, at least, Jerry, that they have done an extraordinary job of a seamless transition. So, yeah, there were absolutely other people who were ready to take on Hakeem. Absolutely taken care of. Not going to be, unless I'm wrong. And I've been wrong about every single prediction about the midterm elections, so don't listen to me. It doesn't appear that there's going to be any kind of significant challenge to Hakeem. The number 2 position, taken care of. The number 3 position, taken care of. The people who are thinking of challenging them have a path to something else. So that instability, all the instability in my view now in this transition is on the Republican side. Kevin McCarthy has to thread a needle that's pointed at his back constantly. The instability that should have confronted the Democrats has been taken care of. But then there's the fundraising vacuum.
Yeah.
And then there's negotiating a lot of important bills that Jerry's going to be voting on. And I think that's one reason she decided wisely to stay, so that Hakeem and his leadership team will have that wisdom in proximity.
I love what she said about not wanting to be, with Thanksgiving coming up, not wanting to be the mother-in-law who goes into the kitchen and tells them you're making the stuffing the wrong way. I think she'll have a lot of respect for the
Yes.
people in the conference and let Hakeem find his way.
You're right.
And as we touched on, when I talked about the youth vote, and you talked about McCarthy. So what happened? We were supposed to have a red wave. Was this more of a referendum on Republicans and less on the Biden administration, which midterms typically are? And what does face the McCarthy coming up?
Well, I think what happened was the Democrats did a great job, and Joe Biden led this effort in making this a choice, not a referendum, because midterm elections are a referendum of the person who's in the White House. So I thought that having that conversation, I was wrong when I thought going on the democracy path for Joe Biden, making that his final push, was, I thought, oh no, you have to go towards the economics. But he was spot on. What's also troublesome for Republicans, more than the democracy and the abortion issue, which certainly helped Democrats mitigate their losses, is that given the issues that were top of mind of the public in all the polling, the economy, crime, immigration, the people said, not so fast, Republicans. They did not think, which traditionally they do, especially when you're looking at a referendum election and those independents, those swing 5 to 10% group, they said, no, thank you, Republicans. You know what? You've got too much Trump and craziness, and I want some normalcy. Even if I disagree with the policy, I'm willing to go ahead and pull the lever for a Democrat. Now, what happens to McCarthy? Oof. That's a mess. Personally, I always think of it, Nancy Pelosi, what came to mind was sometimes she was loved, sometimes she was feared, but she was always respected. Always respected. McCarthy is not loved. He is not feared, and he is not respected. So that leaves him in quite a pickle. And I do think he has it from both sides. And Congressman Nadler and Congressman Israel, you would know better than I, but I do think there may be not just the what was once considered fringe right, which is now going to be in leadership, but there still are some moderates who can cause a problem for McCarthy and say, you know what, not this time, not this time.
Yeah.
And will they do it? I don't know, but I'm hopeful because I don't want to see Marjorie Taylor Greene on any committee, but she will be on one, but maybe she can be a little bullied by those moderates.
And is this what we're going to see in the new Congress? Sort of the retaliation on these committees. I assume the January 6th committee is going to get shut down immediately.
That's correct. And
are we going to see just another series of constant hearings to go after the Democrats?
I think it depends and there are a large number of them, what the moderates will do on the Republican side. And for me, what I'd like to see them push back and say, you know what, we're so divided right now, let's have equal amount of members on a committee. Maybe give the commissionership, but voting, so that way when it came to votes, you actually needed one to come over. And that could make a difference, but it has to be the moderates that push it.
On the characterization of everybody respecting Nancy Pelosi, like her, dislike her, fear her, that level of respect, I want to share this one story. And again, my friend Jerry may have been on the floor when this happened. This is vintage Nancy Pelosi as well. A Republican was really going after her on the floor one day, just lacing into her, as they were prone to do. And that Republican caught Pelosi was on the floor, and he caught her glimpse, and he scurried over after yielding the floor. And I was right next to her, and he said, oh, Madam Leader at the time, Madam Leader, I may have gone too far, but, it's all show business, isn't it? And she looked at him, and she said, oh, dear, I don't even know your name.
But that
Is
was
that not
one
vintage
of
Pelosi?
That is
but
vintage.
that
That's
was her
fantastic.
greatest
That's
strength
fantastic.
because
Yeah.
besides all of her political acumen, it was also her ability to put the party ahead of herself. And she
Always.
told Democrats in tough spots, you want to go after me?
Yeah.
Go after me. You want to you can go after
Yeah.
me in an election. That's fine. Vote for me afterwards. But if it helps you win, I don't have the ego.
Yeah.
Which
that's
there's
important,
no
right.
way anyone in leadership on the Republican side.
On McCarthy, look, this guy is skating on thin ice with a hand grenade with the pin pulled halfway out with this new majority. So he's got to make a tough decision. It seems like it'll be 213 to 222. It probably end up there, Jerry, maybe 214, 221. Anyway, he does not have room for error. And he's got to make a decision, to Susan's point. Is my leadership dependent on Marjorie Taylor Greene? Or is my leadership dependent on moderates? And that's going to be a very hard decision for him to make, which means that every single vote in the Republican caucus is magnified right now. Everybody has more power than they would have if McCarthy had more maneuvering room. I take Long Island as an example. Contrary to the rest of the country, we got wiped out on Long Island.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about that.
4 Republicans. But here's, and love to talk more about it, but in connection to this point, those 4 Republicans, if they come to Congress as part of the Freedom Caucus and they decide to become Marjorie Taylor Greene, they ain't coming back in 2 years. Long Island is not a Marjorie Taylor Greene constituency. So they've got to decide, do I want to be Peter King or Marjorie Taylor Greene? Peter King was a moderate member who voted against his own party. If McCarthy decides that it's the Marjorie Taylor Greene wing that's going to prevail, those Republicans are in trouble. So it's not just McCarthy who's on the spot. Jerry's new colleagues, Garbarino and LaLota and Santos and D'Esposito, they have to make the same calculations, which is why I said most of the instability right now will be on the Republican side, not the Democratic
Just
side.
because you said instability, sorry, Basil, just want to jump in.
This is
Just
a little-
curious, what do you think? Does McCarthy endorse Trump before the race for Speaker?
If he believes that his leadership, well, you know, if he makes the calculation that his leadership depends on it, absolutely he'll do it. Absolutely.
And so I want to go back to this point about Long Island because, you know, got to talk about Long Island. Got to talk about Long Island. What happened? What happened? Was it just, it could have, one could argue
think okay.
it was Jerry, it was the redistricting that caused some problems. But
No.
I wonder, and this is also maybe a point for you as well, Susan, I think Democrats for a long time believed that New York Republicans weren't like national Republicans. Is that changing? And is there something that Democrats should do, could do?
I think this is one of the most misread and misunderstood results of the entire election. People have blamed redistricting. It didn't help. Those districts, in the original map, Democrats probably would have picked up 3 to 4 seats in New York. In the maps that were operative, we're going to lose 3 seats, net 3 in New York, Jerry. So that didn't help. It made the districts in Long Island much tighter. And Long Island districts are tight to begin with. It's a very moderate, it's a defiantly moderate, just right of center, just left of center electorate. When it believes one party has gone too far, it, in a Pavlovian way, will elect the other party to course correct. So there was that. But it was also something else that people I think are not reading enough into, and that is the fact that Lee Zeldin was better known to the Long Island electorate than Kathy Hochul.
Yeah.
Kathy Hochul was a new governor who stepped into the position, didn't run. This is Lee's media market. Yeah. And he was always perceived, I mean, he kind of got away with a lot. He was always perceived as a moderate local guy. He had dominated the media market since he defeated Tim Bishop. And people were just used to him and didn't know Hochul that well. And then add to that the issue of crime, to the consternation of some of you and to the contentment of probably few of you here at Hunter. When my party is identified on the issue of crime as defunding the police and cashless bail, guess what? That plays pretty well on Long Island. I mean, that hits people in the gut. And Lee Zeldin and the Republicans played it to the hilt.
But there was one other thing. I mean, you really could have seen this coming a mile away based on the 2021 elections in Nassau and Suffolk. Let's face it, Bruce Blakeman got carried over the finish line because of the Attorney General's race, where cash bail, you ask Ann Donnelly what she had for breakfast, she'd be like, well, before I get to that, let me tell you about cash bail. But it was bail reform, was there, the fiscal stuff was there, and I think the fact that when Bruce took over Nassau, he didn't go completely bonkers, as moderate. That's how you have to kind of roll. And so there was a lot of stuff already in the water there that didn't exist in other districts because of the way their elections came in. So 2021, I think, was the bellwether, which made me think, frankly, that there would have been more Republican pickup in seats in more swing districts. But it didn't go that way. But your point about Lee Zeldin, I think, is also spot on when it comes to Suffolk. And he got his people to turn out. They showed up, and that helped them on the
What did we
lines
say?
going
There
down.
Turnout was
more-
way down among Democrats
Yeah.
on Long Island,
Yeah.
way up among Republicans
Right.
in
There was
Nassau,
more
Suffolk.
turnout in Suffolk than Brooklyn or some ridiculous statistic like that, right? And is that, I mean, is it, I've been thinking about this too. Could someone like George Pataki be elected in New York right now?
No. Really, no. And here's the thing. I don't know if it was Lee Zeldin that was all of that. When
Was
I look at
was it Donald Trump that changed that dynamic?
it may be in part, but here's what I know is that today we came out that there was one donor that gave Lee Zeldin $11 million. We saw all the advertising. He, in New York should always be a 20-point race and a statewide level, just based on it. But Lee Zeldin came in with 6 points. Oh my God, wow, and all that money. Here's the shocking part. Letitia James ran against someone who didn't have bus fare, and he came in within 8 points. What does that tell you? 8 points, no money, 6 points, 20 million bucks. And add to that, even Chuck Schumer, who won by 44% last time he ran, only won by 13%. So
And lost Long Island. Lost
Long Island, yes.
Lost Long Island, where there's not a graduation ceremony
Yeah.
that he hasn't attended.
Twice. But how is that? So I could throw it back to you if you want to try and tackle that, because I don't know if it's one party rule.
Well,
in
do
New
we have a
York,
messaging
or
problem?
Is it messaging?
No, I think it was a bit of a perfect storm. Crime played very
Yeah, played
effectively.
well.
There's no question. And there's again these bookends. Words are very important. And so when you do a focus group and you say to people, what do you think about the Democrats' policies on crime? Their 42-point policy on crime, and they say cashless bail and defund the police, and I don't like it. You got an uphill battle on messaging.
Well, wasn't it I moderated after George Floyd that congressional panel that
That's
you put
right.
together.
Yep, with the
And
CDC.
and it was Jim Clyburn. I asked the first question of Congressmember Clyburn, and he said the exact same thing. He said, we are going to have a messaging problem on this defund police.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, we understand the issue. The issue is very important, but we cannot say that. And he made that point.
But I have
2
a
years
question I'll
ago.
throw back to you guys. So why did Democrats do so well in Westchester and so poorly in Nassau and Suffolk? My theory is because Zeldin was a local presence, and so that inflated the numbers. But I mean, Democrats did okay in Westchester,
We
did they not?
Well, Andrea's up there, and and I think there's been, to be honest, when I was at the party, for those that don't know, I used to be the executive director of the state Democratic Party
Back when we used to win.
back when we used to run. Well, I will say the one thing that I'm proud of, well, not the one thing, but one of the things that I'm proud of from that time, we flipped the Staten Island DA after Eric Garner. We were able to flip that. And then we laid the foundation for, we got rid of the IDC. That was a thing. That was a big thing, and very controversial for those that don't know. The Independent Democratic Conference, those 10 Democrats that caucused with Republicans, the state committee members in the party were, and Andrew Cuomo was governor at the time, just constantly pushing the party to create a resolution to make sure that they could get rid of those IDC members. There was resistance by other parts of the party, but eventually under my watch, we did the resolution, and then the very next time we could, they were defeated. And then we had a couple of congressional seats that flipped.
But
So
it's interesting that you bring up the IDC,
Yeah.
because if you think about it,
I know I walked into this one.
it was the result of a coup. There was a coup
That's
in
right.
Albany.
That's right.
We can't forget that. And
2009.
I will admit, I was in the employment of the state Republicans. I remember when they said it, and they were like, I said, who do you got? And they told me, and I said, who else you got? And we knew it wasn't going to go far. But it did happen as a result of Democrats leaving the Democratic
Yeah,
Party, not the
yeah.
party necessarily, but the establishment. So I wonder again, are we not at a time where there is room, maybe not for a coup because the Democrats have veto-proof majority, but is there is there enough friction there for something else to happen in
Yeah,
New York? Because
yeah.
people are,
There's
There's a lot of angry
restlessness
people.
out there. Yeah, and I think to the Westchester question, I think flows into that. There was a lot of infrastructure built in Westchester to help the then candidate for county executive, George Latimer, right? And I think that sort of helped build what we've seen in come out of Westchester. Having said that, ultimately, I do think that's what it comes down to. It's, are you investing in infrastructure? I say this all the time, that the first meeting I went to as the ED of the party nationally, when the EDs and the chairs meet different parts of the country, 50 plus the 7 territories. Poor guy, Cecil from the Virgin Islands. It's just him representing all of the Virgin Islands. I miss that guy. But we would get together a couple of times a year, and invariably they would say that the parties just don't have money. And what do the parties do? They elect down ballot. That's all your down ballot races. And during, we talk about this a lot, that during the Obama years, Democrats lost about 1,000 seats in state legislatures across the country. The way that he raised money, from my understanding, was different from the way Bill Clinton raised money for the party. Every time he would come into the state, the DNC would get a piece, and then the state party would get a piece. The Obama folks didn't really do that. And so there wasn't a lot of actual money being given to the party, particularly because you had Obama for America, not New York Democratic Party.
Controlled all his lists. He never
Right.
gave it back to the party.
And it became really difficult for parties to raise money as a result of that, because it was more like, well, how are you helping Obama, right? Like, so what are you really there for? And as a result of that, because we didn't have that infrastructure, a lot of other organizations like Indivisible, Arena, and so on sort of popped up to try to mirror what the parties do. But ultimately, the party still works. I'm not the whole
Well,
boss.
yeah,
I'm
look,
not a boss
you guys
guy.
picked up state houses
We
for the
did.
first time since what,
And I'm
1936?
not a political boss
That
guy.
shows there's money on the ground.
I'm not a machine party guy, but machines sort of kind of work
Well,
sometimes.
let me just apply that to the
Yeah,
midterm.
that's right.
I've had my share of differences with Sean Patrick Maloney over the years. I do not, and he lost his seat. I do not believe that he's getting the credit that he deserves for building infrastructure early on in the cycle. This is, fundamentals are really important.
Yep.
They are still important. And one of the secrets of this midterm election, 2 secrets. Number one, the DCCC invested in their frontline candidates really early. So they had stockpiled hordes of cash, knowing that they were facing this historic wave, which averages out to a loss of 26 seats in a midterm election. That's the historic average. President's party loses an average of 26 seats in every midterm election. They fortified their frontliners very early on, and they scared out some Republican recruits because they had so much money. The second thing they did is even the red to blue challengers were running ahead of Republican incumbents in fundraising. And so my many conversations with DCCC, particularly the political director, an exceptionally talented woman named Whitney Larson, a week before the election, when I was going on air, I know about you, saying Democrats are going to lose 15 to 25 seats, and prognosticating, she was telling me, I'll tell you why you're wrong. Our red to blues, they're in good shape. Nobody's picking up on this, and the polling is broken. These polls that have our red to blue challengers way behind, it's broken. She would say, I'm telling you it's broken. We may lose 5 frontliners. Turns out they lost fewer than 5, it looks like. And our red to blues are in much better shape. The point that I've just made in a very long-winded way is to say that fundamentals and infrastructure
Really important.
are really important in
And
an
I
election.
think old school politics, just knocking on doors and talking to voters. And I think one of the lessons from this cycle is when we talked about young voters coming out in record numbers, You also had folks, and whatever you feel about Working Families Party at DSA, but they had a lot of people on the ground, knocking on doors, standing on street corners. That stuff still works, and it works well.
By the way, you know who else got that? Sorry, it's disturbing. It's the worst thing he
You're not
ever
gonna tell me
did.
Herschel Walker.
No,
Oh.
Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Donald Trump got that when he was elected. Before he even took the oath of office, he was meeting with Republican state committees, putting in chairmen who were all Trump. And those committee members put in, guess what? Trump supporters. So that's where you started to see a purge of a lot of the Republican leadership within the state parties. Now, of course, since it was only built to serve Donald Trump, it never went to help other candidates, and now we're seeing the results of that, meaning you see candidates being, the Trumpiest candidates winning Republican primaries. But Trump did that extremely effective, and I would argue it's going to still take at least another 4 years before they cycle out, because you need to see more extreme Trump candidates lose until the people on the ground get frustrated and say, we don't want to lose anymore.
Right. Nothing succeeds like success. Got to win, right? So there are two questions that I want to ask. The first I'm going to ask now, and then I want to come to you, the audience, if you have one or two very, very, very quick questions to ask, because they have to get them out of here. And then I'll come and ask the final question. But first, the first question before we go to the audience. What's going to happen these next 2 years? I mean, Trump has already announced the Supreme Court is the Supreme Court right now. We still waiting on the Herschel Walker runoff. What do you expect in this first year or two?
I never pretended to be the smartest member of Congress, although with the exception of Jerry Nadler, the competition wasn't always that stiff. But I love my history. I love reading about history. I'm passionate about it. And so this very much reminds me, this incoming Republican majority very much reminds me of the class of 2010. 2010, the Democrats lost 63 seats in the House. Barack Obama's job approval a week before the midterm election of 2010 was just a tick higher than Joe Biden's job approval was a week before this midterm election. And so we were very dour about our prospects. We saw no path. Some of us didn't even see a path for Barack Obama's reelection. It was so bad. And then what happened? 2 years later, Barack Obama wins 8 out of 9 battleground states, and we pick up 8 seats. We claw back 8 seats from the Republicans. We gain seats. 2 things happened in the interim, which I believe apply significantly to what may happen in the next 2 years. Number one, the economy got better under Barack Obama. It was awful. God bless, our luck as Democrats, the economy, right? People, they just don't feel the results of the Inflation Reduction Act or ARA. They don't feel those results. They're reading about how great it is, but they don't feel it. And so they vote against Democrats in the first midterm. And then after that midterm, things actually get better. So they feel better about the economy. That's the first thing that happened. The second thing that happened is the class of 2010, it was the Tea Party crazy class. Mm-hmm. They shut down the government. They tried to slash Medicare and Social Security. They were all about ideology. They were disruptors. It was chaos. It was screaming. And the country, America, course corrected in 2012. My own analysis is if they repeat those mistakes, and they're gonna, then I think that bodes very well for Democrats in 24 nationally. Now, the Senate's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to hold the Senate in 24. I think the House is, again, 2 weeks ago I was saying, oh my God, we're going to lose 25 seats, so don't make me sign an affidavit in my own blood about these predictions. But I think it's very possible that the Senate may flip Republican and the House may flip Democrat, and there will be a Democratic president, just based on my read of history. And the Republicans have already given us the overture. They're talking about removing Adam Schiff from the Intel Committee. They're talking about spending the next 2 years investigating Hunter Biden. I haven't heard a single Republican, with all the respect in the world to a nonpartisan audience, please tell me what Republican has stood up, including Kevin McCarthy, and said, here's how we're going to reduce inflation. Here's how we're going to build infrastructure. What they've been talking about is the partisan stuff. America is a defiantly course-correcting country, and I believe that they may course-correct in 2024. Tough 2 years up to then, but I think a decent outcome at that point. What do you think?
I agree a lot with that, because if you look at where we are today, we had an infrastructure bill that passed. There were no shovels in the ground yet, but there sure will be this coming year. We had prescription drugs, a reduction in cost for seniors that did not take effect yet, but it will next year. So, and then the base of the economy, I'm not so sure we'll see inflation fixed, because it's really not a fixable thing per se as far as costs go. But I think there'll be some balancing out of it. If the Republicans were smart, that would be their hearing. Find out where the supply chain issues are. What's the headline today? Thanksgiving dinner costs 26% more. Why does it cost 26% more? Do a hearing on that. Maybe you'll find out that only 4 companies in the U.S. control all of the poultry out there. Oh, that may be something worth investigating, but that's not sexy enough, and it requires brains. And Marjorie Taylor Greene does not have the capability to do anything like that. So we will hear her yell, and it will be necessary for course correction. The other thing is Jim Jordan should scare every American out there, because not because he's a blowhard, not because he just likes to get the highlights. It's because he knows enough to be dangerous. And that's what scares me. Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't scare me. She doesn't know enough to be really dangerous. Jim Jordan, he can be dangerous. So I think you're going to see that course correction. The thing that won't play, that is different from 2010, is Donald Trump. I think that that's going to have a tremendous effect in the next 2 years, because he will always want the news cycle. He demands loyalty. They're going to have Republicans twisting in the wind and pretzels like nobody's ever seen. So it's going to be backwards and forwards and up and down for McCarthy.
Very quickly, DeSantis and Pence join that primary?
They will say they are until they're not. But I'm also someone convinced that Donald Trump will not be on the ballot come 2024.
Well, because he's in jail. It's a question. It's a question. It's a question. Because of indictment, or you just don't think he's going to do it?
I think.
No.
I won't even go there.
No.
But I think it's because I have a little conspiracy theory. I'll give you my green room talk. That maybe it's also part of a deal he gets out of for maybe Georgia. I think Georgia scares the hell out of him, that investigation.
Yeah.
I think maybe he takes a civil fine, he pays the money,
Yeah.
and then decides to hold back. Plus, it would be way better for him in his world, in his mind, to be not running, because then he can anoint who he wants and he could just cause havoc.
Yeah, I have now that I'm out of office, I get to talk to my former Republican colleagues, and they know that it won't be used against them on the floor or in a D-Trip 30-second ad. And this is what they're telling me. None of the Republican establishment, obviously, whether it's Pence or DeSantis, none of them favor Donald Trump. I mean, Reince Priebus, Trump's first chief of staff, who's a very dear friend of mine, says that most of the establishment doesn't favor him, and also have now concluded that he has been a drag on them as a result of this midterm. They say this. They say he was a phenomenon in 2016. Nobody believed that he was going to win the Republican primary. Nobody believed he was going to do it. And so they didn't really take him seriously. They just thought he was a horrible distraction. And by the time he caught on, it was too late to oppose him. And their survival was at stake in opposing him, because he took no prisoners. Now they believe that they have figured out his vulnerabilities. Now they believe that they can exploit some chinks in the armor. And now they are more confident of the ability to take him down. And so they're saying there may be a very significant primary, Republican primary, with lots of people in it who believe, let's all beat him up, right? And one of us will win, but let's all take him down.
No, they won't. That's the problem. If you have 10 people running in a primary and Donald Trump's the 11th, great.
Well,
Donald Trump's going to
10.
win the primary with 15%, because the other 10 are going to divide it all up.
which would be great for Democrats in 24.
Well, I'm not saying that it wouldn't be, but I'm just saying that I think that's going to be the problem is there's going to be more than 2 or 3 Republicans, trust me, that have the ego.
And
So
there's a
who
Nikki
has-
Haley in
on
there.
that?
There's
So
a
who
Nikki
do
Haley
you think
potential,
has the fortitude to take him on? DeSantis has the fortitude to take him on? Does Pence have the fortitude to take him on?
Pence does not. DeSantis does, but I am of
Cruz?
I think no.
I don't want to hijack
No,
the
no, no, no.
conversation. Yeah.
But I do
Nikki
think
Haley or
Nikki, no, I think that they're all too timid and they've all have too much Trump wrapped around
Yeah.
him. I think we may see someone who comes out from more of a populist
Chris
kind of side.
Christie.
Christina, yeah, no. but we could I think that's to be determined.
Okay.
I'm not ready to make that
It
decision.
I'm telling you, this has to be the quickest. Student first. Hi, we have a microphone coming.
Thank you. Okay. My question is,
But tell us your name and
oh,
where you
Isabella.
are.
I'm majoring in political science, public policy. It's my second year at Hunter,
Where are you from?
the Bronx. Okay. Yeah, BX.
Probably makes you a
my
Yankee
question is
fan.
about midterm elections in New York State. We lost the congressional seats and some 4 congressional seats in Long Island. What do you think about the calls for Jay Jacobs to resign? That's coming from the left. Yeah.
I purposely did not go there.
Wow.
But the student.
Good
yeah.
question.
Great question.
Good
Great
question.
Great question.
And now I have to answer it, don't I? It's a great question. Look, I think he deserves criticism for what happened on Long Island. I don't think there was enough of a focus on a turnout model. Clearly, something went wrong in the turnout model, and something was wrong in the polling. However, I don't believe it's fair to blame him for everything again. It was that perfect storm. If Lee Zeldin was not on the ballot for governor, Robert Zimmerman would have won that race.
Yeah.
That was just having Kathy versus Zeldin in a Zeldin media market. So I don't think Jay deserves blame for that.
Although he should be out. And the reason I say this, I think he should have been out a while ago. I think when you look at Kathy Hochul coming in, she should have put her own chairperson in there for that spot. That would have been the political wise thing to do. And let's not forget, Jay also is very close with the former governor and still speaks to him to this day. So I'm not convinced that he was the best person to put in there who would have Kathy's best interests in part. And plus, he was really lazy. Basil, sorry, you're an you know the infrastructure of the party. I will not have you critique his job, but there are a lot of people who were in that position who believed in investing in the party across the state and building up infrastructure. And Jay was just like, the governor's my friend.
I will go to a next question. That's all right. Yes. Again, yes, please wait for the mic.
My name's Brad Balfour. I'm a writer and live in the Upper East Side. What are we going to do about the youth vote? That's where the secret for sauce for I think the Democratic Party in every election going forward. You've got the Gen Zs are coming of age. And I think also the Democratic Party has no concept of social media. So I think that's one of the problems, or at least what I see. When I get emails from the Democratic Party, I get emails and everything instead of a real survey, it all points to fundraising, and it turns me off. Always
that's
turns me off.
interesting.
There's not one email I've gotten that didn't point to fundraising.
And if I
They
just
got to learn a lesson of getting feedback through social media. They have no concept
That's
how to use
interesting.
social
And
media.
I'll just say very quickly, as a Gen Xer, I'm so happy for Hakeem Jeffries. That is that's my generation right there. So youth vote.
How much time do we have? I want to make sure that I'm
Answer your
okay.
question.
I
Go
don't
ahead,
want to
go
abuse you. So I'll tell you a quick story about why that digital fundraising, that online fundraising works, and why you keep getting those emails. It's your fault. It's your fault. There's an algorithm. For as long as people respond, you're going to get the emails. I used to lead these CODELs, congressional delegations, to Gettysburg. It's one of my favorite places in the world, Harold Holzer. And we were on an U.S. Army bus going from Washington to Gettysburg with about 8 members of Congress and another 10, 15 guests of the Army. And on this bus, I was chair of D-Trip at the time, and a guy in back of me starts patting my shoulder. He goes, hey. I turn around. I'm like, where in New York are you from? Hey, yo. He said, how is this possible? I've been on this bus with you for 2 hours. I've already gotten 4 emails from you asking for $3. How does that work? It works because it works. So I understand that it's got to be balanced, but it is success driven. Success gets you success. The DCCC, I'm going to get to the youth vote. I'm going to get there. The DCCC, well, we're not asking young people for money. We're just asking people who have disposable income for money. The DCCC, when I became chair, 1/3 of its revenues were member dues, 1/3 of its revenues were personal contributions, 1/3 were online contributions. When I left, 60% of DCCC's revenues were online, 20% personal, 20% members. It works because it works. On the youth vote, look, the great salvation of Democrats in this midterm were young voters. We never would have come as close as we did without young voters, and the Senate would have gone to Republican without young voters. So in the after-action reports and the analysis, which will happen, the Democrats really need to focus on how you sustain that energy among young voters.
Yeah, you keep going to the Republicans because we are giving them to you on a platter. 27% of the youth vote showed up, and that was a big jump. It's the first time, about the biggest jump in about 30 years. Why? I don't know. Tell half of them that you no longer have a right that you did a year ago. Tell half of them that you have no control over their body. And then tell the other half who grew up thinking the same, that people were equal, that, by the way, the woman sitting next to you really isn't because she can't control her body. That is a horrible thing. And now let's look at some of the other culture wars that the Republicans have taken on, especially when it comes to same-sex marriage, which is now something that is in the news. But tell me a person under 30 who doesn't know a same-sex couple who have been together or married, or it's a matter of course. It's just a matter of, it's just every day. So you're going to tell me my best friend can't be married, but I can? It doesn't make sense. So I think the youth vote is responding a lot to the culture wars, and that is going to help the Democrats more than anything the Democrats can actually do.
It's a fundamental understanding of how young people live and move, right? And if whoever has the key to that or can really understand that.
You know who to watch on this issue of the youth vote is a new member of Congress, Maxwell Frost from Florida. Watch this guy. He is focused on that.
Yeah. 2 very quick questions to, again, you, sir. Wait for the thing.
Question about raising the debt ceiling. If the crazies control the Republicans in the House, will we get a raising of the debt ceiling, or will everything just come to a halt? And can that vote be taken before the new Congress comes in?
Yeah, you talked about the government shutdown of the 2010s and such.
Well, Jerry can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe it can come to a vote until the Department of Treasury says we've reached our limits. Is that right? No?
Come to a vote. The problem is that Chuck doesn't have a vote in the Senate right now.
Okay. So it may go down to the wire. The way Pelosi always handled it was this. Boehner would call, or Paul Ryan, and say, I don't have enough votes on my side. And Pelosi would say, Paul, John, X plus Y equals 218. You give me the X, I'll see if I can get you the Y. We'll get to 218. That will be the challenge for Hakeem Jeffries. Can he put that kind of formula together?
Okay.
Well, I think actually he'll be willing to do it because Hakeem's very pragmatic.
Yeah.
I just don't, I'm not convinced he'll have someone to work with. I mean, you're
On the
making
other
the
side,
assumption
yeah.
Nancy always had someone, or Speaker
There was
Pelosi
normal.
always
There
had
was
someone to
normal to
speak
work
to.
with.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I came to this meeting because I thought perhaps we'd be talking about what was going to happen in terms of getting anything accomplished with the divided government. I saw a glimmer of hope in that bill discussing preserving gay marriage, that 12 Republicans actually stepped out and they had their picture taken and everything, so we have proof. Are these perhaps indications that sanity? No. Thank you very much. Could you explain why?
No, because
Sorry-
it's happening
sorry to ruin
before-
your trip. We're
Just
sorry.
real simply, because it's happening before the end of this session. The vote happened in the Senate with the current Senate makeup. The same thing with the House will take the vote on the Senate bill. This House is still under Democrat control, and they'll get some Republican votes. But once this House is gone,
McCarthy wants to shelter as many of his new members as he can from casting bad votes. So this lame duck may be extraordinarily productive because a lot of the outgoing Republicans are going to be willing to cast their votes on tough things. He does not want his new members to come in and have to. He doesn't even want them to come in to show up at meetings and yell at him. So to the extent that he can get
He
all
just
the
doesn't wanna see 'em.
controversy off the deck, clear the decks of that controversy, he will.
Last question, sir.
Yeah, the 24 presidential, what about the Democrats? And is there any room for independent third party? 40% of the national electorate is independent. People are very dissatisfied with both parties' leadership. Is there any chance for that?
I'll do the independent part.
No, structurally, the structural impediments make it almost impossible for there to be any kind of. I'm sorry, and as Congressman Adler points out, obviously the Electoral College is the principal structural impediment to a third party. And I'll just say this very briefly on the presidential contenders. There is no incentive whatsoever for President Biden to show his hand. It would be political malpractice for him to make any indication. Number one, why would he want to advertise, I'm now a lame duck president? Number two, for as long as he is the president and a potential nominee, he freezes the field. Fundraising, you can't, the people who are out there, and there are people out there having meetings, but it's like, psst, do you want to come to a meeting? Right? We don't want to piss off the president. So he controls the field. So he is in a good place. I hope he runs again, but that is my own personal opinion. He is in a good place, and there's no incentive for him to make any premature announcements.
Although I would look to see who leaves the administration come January 1st. That's going to be a key indication, I think, of some folks and where they're heading. And as far as an independent movement, it is a movement. It's not about getting on the ballot of 50 states. That's the easy part. I've been asked about this a lot and to join with organizations. And I'm like, tell me you've got a financial commitment for the next 20 years, and I can tell you if an independent party or movement is possible. The problem with that is that people constantly put it up for either around a person or around frustration and not thinking of it as the need for really growing and building a party.
Now, the last question I want to ask our guests here, what are you reading?
I'm just going to give my answer. Go ahead, you have the bookstore.
I am reading a wonderful history by Douglas Brinkley, known to Harold Holzer, called Silent Spring Revolution. It's a history of the environmental movement from John F. Kennedy to Richard Nixon. It's very refreshing because the landmark environmental laws passed by Congress were always passed almost unanimously. The Endangered Species Act, 2 votes against it, for example. Richard Nixon creates the EPA, authorizes the National Environmental Protection Act. John F. Kennedy, he was a lot of the book is about this love of land that people had in their own experiences. So Richard Nixon lived off the Pacific, and he just wanted to protect the Pacific because it was his home. He was a NIMBY. And JFK, Massachusetts, loved sailing, wanted to protect the oceans. And LBJ was probably one of the most unheralded environmentalists. So it's a beautiful treatment. It's about 1,000 pages. A beautiful treatment of bipartisan environmental movements ignited by Rachel Carson in Silent Spring, where she warned us of pesticides, and involves Supreme Court Justice William O. Douglas, who was just at the forefront of these things. And if I didn't mention it before, available at theodoresbooks.com. Brinkley was with us yesterday. We had an event with Douglas Brinkley yesterday on the book, and it was standing room only.
Because I'm a glutton for punishment, I actually just finished Maggie Haberman's book.
Right.
Which I sometimes wonder what's wrong with me when I do things like that. But I have to admit, it is kind of fun because being from New York, getting some of the inside from Maggie was a lot of fun and really great. And so because I did that to myself, I'm actually starting The Circle, which there was a movie about it. Tom Hanks was in it. So it's complete fiction, and I try and always read fiction, biography or autobiography, and then something in the real world. So I like being out of the real world.
Well, I want to know what the chairman is reading.
Oh, what's chairman reading?
I just finished reading Unchecked by Rachel
Oh,
Oh, wow, yeah.
very, very good.
Before we go, I do want to thank Professor Miller, Congressmember Nadler. It's wonderful to see you. Harold, for your leadership. I did see come in one of the first people I met in Democratic politics when I was doing work for Hillary Clinton. That's Sally Menard. It's one right there. It's wonderful to see you. No, listen, I could never forget. One of the first people I met through Hillary Clinton when she was running for the Senate.
Freedoms Park?
No, this
Right?
is when she was running for the Senate.
No, but
first
now-
race
but-
for Senate.
but-
Oh, but yes.
Right, but more recently, For Freedoms Park.
And more for Freedom's Park. It's wonderful to see you, Sally. Thank you so much for coming. To all of you, we had a wonderful conversation today, and I'm so glad you all were able to
Thank you,
Thank
Basil.
you, everybody.
participate. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you very much. We have a reception upstairs. There's coffee. What else is there? Yeah, coffees, cookies, all kinds of great treats for you to take with you on your way out. If I don't see any of you, have a great holiday. Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.